This is the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the first podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Featuring insight from Arkansas baseball color analyst Bubba Carpenter. Here's Matt Jones.
We mentioned on the podcast before, you never know what you're going to get in a regional draw. You're actually going to get regional teams, or you're going to get sent somewhere far away. For Arkansas this year, they get a regional draw. They go 3 hours away to Stillwater, where they'll be in the Stillwater Regional at a great stadium on the campus of Oklahoma State. They'll be joined there by Grand Canyon, who the Razorbacks will play Friday at noon on SEC Network, and Missouri State will also be over in Stillwater. Bubba, it seems like every time that Arkansas gets into a regional, there's a pretty good chance that either Oklahoma State or Missouri State or both are going to be there. Seems like maybe every 3 or 4 years we see these teams in a regional field. These are kind of like frequent dance partners for the Razorbacks.
You know, the only thing missing is Oral Roberts.
That's right.
That's another team that always seems to be there. But I tell you what, Matt, if you look around, I like this. I like this regional for us. I like that it's close and our fan base can still travel. I don't know if they're going to be able to get tickets or not, but I tell you what, I really like this regional for us. Not just the matchups, but just that it's close. And now Grand Canyon is a tough team. They worry. They're not your typical 3-seed team. They're scary. They've got some guys in that can swing it. They've got some pitchers that can throw it. So I mean, it's not going to be an easy task. But I like where we're at right now. I like the fact that we're going to Stillwater versus traveling way off somewhere. So I think for the mindset of the players, that's a definite bonus for us.
Later in the podcast, we'll talk to Troy Eklund, who's Bubba's old college teammate, and he's Bubba's equivalent on the TV, the color analyst for the Razorbacks SEC Network Plus broadcast. He's going to be in Stillwater this weekend calling the games for SEC Network, the other ESPN affiliates. The games, they're never on just one network. You have to watch it on a day-by-day basis where they're going to be. But Troy will join us a little bit later for his thoughts on this regional. I tell you, Bubba, the thing that jumped out to me and we saw going into the postseason, all these different projections. You never know if those are going to be right. But this was the regional that I was hoping for, selfishly, because it's a short drive over there. I think it's, like you said, it's a good opportunity for people who are fans of Razorback baseball. They can go watch the games. And on the ticket situation, tickets are going to be in abundance for the game against Grand Canyon on Friday if you can make it to Stillwater at noon on a weekday. The issue becomes if you play the home team of the regional at any point during the regional weekend, those are going to be the tickets that are going to be hard to get. But I like this regional for Arkansas. Oklahoma State, I was shocked that they were the number 7 overall seed. This is a team that, very similar to Arkansas, had been in the top 5 to 8 of the national polls for most of the season. You remember after Arkansas beat Auburn a few weeks ago, Oklahoma State actually leapfrogged them in the polls because they swept Texas in Austin that weekend. They went to 3, Arkansas fell to 4. But Oklahoma State is a lot like Arkansas in that they didn't close the season very well. They lost 7 of their final 12 games. They're 5-7 in their last 12. By comparison, Arkansas is 4-8 in its last 12 coming into this regional. So I was shocked that they got one of the top 8 national seeds. And, to me, if there was one national seed that looks most susceptible to being beaten on its home field, I think it's Oklahoma State, not just because Arkansas is there, but like you mentioned, Grand Canyon's a good team. You've got Missouri State coming in, who's won 16 of its last 25. This is a really strong field with a national seed that doesn't necessarily feel like it ought to be a national seed.
Yeah, you're right. And, it's crazy when you start looking at who's going to be the national seeds and then who's just going to get a regional. There was a lot of talk going back and forth. And early on, you and I talked about Stillwater and how that would be a good spot for us. I liked Stillwater. And then, I also liked Austin. I thought that would have been a good matchup for us just because the old school in me would love to play the Longhorns in a regional. But I tell you, the way it all shook out, I really like where we're at, Matt. A little surprising to see them get the overall 7th seed. But hey, it's crazy some of the decisions that were made. I know it was a tough year. I know Mike Buddy, and I saw an interview with him. He's on the selection committee. He chairs it, and there are a lot of tough decisions. I think some teams got left out this year, and it was really unfortunate that it got left off. They were bubble teams that didn't make it, and then a few surprises that got in. that, don't know if they deserve it or not.
Yeah.
Ole Miss maybe being one of those teams. And so, it's crazy when it all comes down, but that just goes to show you throughout the course of the season, every game matters. And it's so important. We talk about it's different than football season, but with that being said, every game in baseball still matters. And so it's so important.
And like NC State got left out. One of the reasons that you had so many bubble teams that didn't make the cut this year is because there were a lot of upsets in conference tournaments where teams had earned an at-large bid, regardless of if they won their conference tournament. This goes back to, I think, one of the really flawed problems that we have with the NCAA tournament, not just in baseball. I think the same thing in basketball and in some of the other sports is that they allow the tournament winners to get into the NCAA tournament. They're not giving the automatic bids to the teams from these smaller conferences who have had the better year. And a perfect example of this is Grand Canyon, who Arkansas is going to open with. They went 25-5 this year in the WAC. They beat some really good non-conference teams. They beat Stanford. They beat Oregon State. They beat Texas Tech twice. They beat Arizona twice. They beat Arizona State this year. So they're going to get in based on that body of work, regardless of what happens. But somebody else from the WAC, New Mexico State, who didn't have nearly as good of a season, they get the automatic bid from that conference. I think that's wrong. And I think what it does is it just rewards teams who have one good weekend versus teams who have had 14 good weekends. You know what I mean?
No, I think you're right. But it also goes back to the importance of those midweek games. I mean, you look at what Grand Canyon did midweek. You just named off all their wins. Those are some really huge wins on Tuesday, Wednesday games. And it goes back to the importance of those games. You look at, they beat Texas Tech on a Tuesday, Wednesday. And at the time, Texas Tech, they're ranked, I think, 4th in the country. And so they've got some really big midweek wins. But, all in all, I think the way it all played out, I think it's really good for the Razorbacks, where we ended up. And so I'm happy with it. I think the players are happy. I think the coaching staff's happy. I think the fan base is happy. And when we get everyone happy and in the right mindset, good things happen in Razorback baseball land, Matt.
The only reason Arkansas is not hosting it, and we've talked about this some in the last 3 weeks, is because of the RPI. Played too many teams in the midweek and even some teams on the weekend who just didn't have the seasons that maybe they thought they would. Illinois State's a perfect example of this, not doing well in the Missouri Valley Conference where they were thought to be one of the favorites going into the season. What stuck out to me, though, Bubba, is that when the regionals were announced on Sunday night, you had 6 teams who had worse winning percentages than Arkansas. What's really interesting is that 2 of those teams are the 2 teams that if Arkansas is going to make a run to Omaha, they're going to have to go through Oklahoma State and North Carolina. North Carolina is the number 10 overall seed in the tournament, so they match up with the winner of the field in Stillwater. And so from that standpoint, it feels like Arkansas's got maybe the best road to Omaha that it could have asked for going on the road. You see what I'm saying? The best road to the College World Series by having to leave home in the first weekend, maybe the first 2 weekends. We'll see if Arkansas is able to advance, and we'll see what happens in Chapel Hill this weekend. I've seen where a lot of people, Kyle Peterson, Kendall Rogers, some others at D1Baseball.com, it seems like Arkansas is kind of this trendy pick to make the College World Series, and I think that probably surprises some people given the way that Arkansas has played over the last couple of weeks.
Well, I looked at all the picks you're talking about also, and I like the fact that they have faith in us, and I agree. I think if you look at the big picture of all the places we could have ended up, this is the best spot. Now, with that being said, Matt, we got to go out and take care of Razorback baseball. We got to play the game the right way, and I really fully expect us to. But I'm one of those that don't even get me on the soapbox about the RPI and all that, because I think if you win 18 games in the SEC and you finish a game out of the West for the championship, you should be hosting. And I say that even though we faltered at the end, I think we're just 1 or 2 wins away from hosting a regional here at home. But, it didn't happen. And, I think I go back and forth on it. I think last week after the SEC tournament, I said, well, we don't deserve to host. But after sleeping on it a few times, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Looking at some of these teams that did host, we're right there. We we could have easily done that, but the RPI hurt us. And, without getting into that big RPI discussion again, I'll just say that, every game matters. I think another win here or there, and we're hosting, but I still like where we're at.
I feel like this regional is going to be about pitching and defense. You look at Grand Canyon, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, all of those teams are top 50 nationally in ERA, in WHIP, in fielding percentage, and strikeouts per 9 innings. So it really feels like, even though that hasn't necessarily been a strength for Arkansas the past 2 weeks, as they've been in kind of this late season swoon, that was their identity for most of this season. And if they can get back to playing like they did, say 2.5, 3, 4 weeks ago, then this probably benefits them a little bit, because these teams are a lot like them.
I think you're right, Matt. But with that being said, I'm going to kind of take the other angle of it. I think if our offense can start clicking, I think, for me, I look at our younger teams. When our younger teams hit, we do everything better. It takes pressure off the pitchers. I think if we can go in there and put together some good at bats and score some runs early, it takes pressure off the pitcher's half. If you're Connor Nolan out there on the mound, you don't feel like you have to make a perfect pitch every time. You can relax, let that two-seamer work, mix in some breaking balls, get your ground ball double plays. If you give up a hit or two, it doesn't matter. But I think a lot of it comes down to us just putting together good at bats. Now, I tell you, Grand Canyon's got some good. If you look at their numbers from their pitchers, they've got some guys that can throw it. They throw strikes. They pitch to contact for the most part. I think if we go up to the plate with the right approach, I think we're going to do well against these guys. They haven't been facing SEC hitters. We've got some really good SEC hitters in our lineup from top to bottom. There's not an easy out. But I take everyone says pitching and defense wins. I say it all the time. It's so important. Our defense up the middle has been huge all year. But I just think on the flip side of that, if we can go out there and put up some runs early, take pressure off our pitching staff, then I think everything else is just going to fall into place.
Well, I was going to get to the hitting stats, Bubba. You've scooped me here. You've got Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon comes in. They're the 10th highest batting average in the country. They've got a higher batting average than anyone else in the SEC, including Tennessee. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they haven't faced the type of arms that some of the SEC teams have, but I still think that's notable. They come in at batting 309 as a team. Then you've got Arkansas, Oklahoma State, and Missouri State, who are 3 of the best power hitting teams in the country. And I was talking to someone who covers Oklahoma State earlier this week, trying to get a feel for O'Brate Stadium, because we've never been over there to O'Brate Stadium for a game. Last time Arkansas played in Stillwater was during the fall of 2019, and they were still at Allie P. Reynolds, and it was a fall exhibition. So they were putting the finishing touches on O'Brate Stadium at that point. From what I'm told, O'Brate Stadium, the home plate backs up to the southwest. So what that tells me is that you're going to have a lot of prevailing winds blowing out to the outfield throughout this series. And it may come down to what team can hit the long ball the best.
All right. So, Matt, I did a little research for you. Friday at 12 o'clock, the wind's going to be blowing out of the southeast at 6 miles an hour. So that's going to be a little bit of a southeast wind drifting out to left center, I believe, the way the stadium sits. And so that definitely benefits us, because our righties, we got some righties that pull the ball. We got some lefties that can stay on the ball and drive it the other way. So I think that benefits us. Now, with that being said, you've got a team like Grand Canyon that can hit. And I'm one of those that says, okay, they're hitting 309 as a team, but they're not facing SEC pitching. But with that being said, hitters can hit. If you're hitting 309 as a team, you can hit. And we've already gone through all the midweek games they've won. They beat Arizona 19-3 on a Tuesday night. Now that was early in the year, in a midweek game, but still, I don't care if you can hit, you can hit. But I think the stadium benefits us, and we've talked about it a lot about the wind to nausea all year. We've talked about the wind, but I think this ballpark's going to play well with our swings and with our approaches at the plate.
A little bit bigger ballpark than Baum Walker Stadium, a little bit smaller than the Hoover Met, if that gives you an idea. 331 to left field, 402 to center, 325 to right. Talking about wind-aided home runs, Oklahoma State had a player hit a 513-foot home run during a game that they played there about 3 weeks ago. Might have been the same week as the Vanderbilt series for the Razorbacks. 513 feet, Bubba.
Well, I tell you what, they all count as one though, so it's
Have you ever hit a
impressive.
500-foot home run?
No, I hit one that, according to the newspaper article, was 498. That was into a win though. No, it was actually in Colorado Springs, and if I remember right, there
Okay.
was a storm coming in. The wind was blowing out really hard. So, but it only went 498. So no 550. That's hitting a ball really hard. So
Didn't you say you've had some wind delays in Colorado Springs?
we did. We had wind outs where it was a beautiful sunny skies, but they had to cancel the game because of the wind. There was so much debris and stuff blowing around the stadium that we actually canceled games because of a wind out, which is just, it's crazy. But yeah, it was a fun place to play. It was always an adventure up there, especially playing outfield up there with the wind blowing. But yeah, that's impressive. 515 feet. That's hitting the ball really hard. But you know what? I'll stack some guys. We got a few guys in our lineup. I'll stack up with that any day.
A couple of the nation's home run leaders are going to be in this regional. Dakota Katowski, who we saw here at Baum about a month ago with Missouri State. He's got 21 home runs this year. That's tied for 13th most nationally. And then Grand Canyon, they've got a big bopper in the middle of their lineup. Taylor Aguilar, 20 home runs this season. He's also got 67 RBI. He's top 25 nationally in both of those categories. Bubba, you know Grand Canyon's coach real well. Andy Stankiewicz, you played with him in the New York Yankees organization in the minor leagues. Tell us some about this coach and maybe what you know about his past and how that translates into what you think Arkansas will see from a team perspective this weekend.
I tell you, I think the best comparison, I can use with Andy Stankiewicz is he played the game a lot like Dave Van Horn played back in the day. He was gritty, hard-nosed player, played the game the right way, and that's the way he coaches, and that's the kind of player he recruits. And so, we saw it in 2020 when he came here. It's going to be a fundamentally sound team. They're going to play hard. They're not going to do a lot of the extracurricular stuff, the Ole Miss type stuff, but they're going to play with energy and passion. And that's the way he was as a player. I'll tell you, he was a great guy. I remember when I first got called up to AAA, it was my second full season, and I got called up to the playoffs in AAA, and Andy was there, and he was a veteran guy, and he really took care of me because I was a little bit nervous getting called up for the playoffs, and all these guys I'd read about them and looked them up. I knew a lot about them, and so he really did a good job of taking care of me. And then a few years later, we got to play together again for an extended period of time, and just a great guy, understands the game. He's kind of a student of the game, but he really does. He reminds me a lot of Dave Van Horn, where they're going to do the little things it takes. They're gonna do fundamental baseball. They're gonna execute. If they need a bunt, they're gonna lay down a bunt. If they need a long ball, they can get a long ball. He's just a good all-around class guy. He's what I call a baseball guy.
We've seen the last few years Arkansas has pitched off in a regional. Patrick Wicklander didn't start game one last year, started against Nebraska instead. We saw it with Isaiah Campbell against TCU in 2019, Blaine Knight in 2018 in the regional. In all of those instances, Arkansas had a more steady number two pitcher than what they've had over the last, probably month and a half, with Hagen Smith and Jackson Wiggins both being, pretty up and down. It would really surprise me if we don't see Connor Nolan start against Grand Canyon on Friday. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt. You look at it, you can't afford to pitch off from these guys because they can swing it. Now, they hit righties a little bit better than they hit lefties, but most teams do. Lefties are just harder to hit. But the only exception to that I could see maybe running a Jackson Wiggins out there, because I don't know what kind of velocity they've seen. I don't know. Have they seen 97, 98 with a slider? Don't know if they've seen that. That might be the only exception. I know the coaching staff has all the data. They'll make the right decision, but I'd be really surprised if we don't see Connor Nolan on the bump at noon on Friday.
Yeah, I just think it's so important to get off to a great start in any regional, but especially in a regional where you're playing on the road and the cards are stacked against you. a little bit like they will be in Stillwater this weekend. We talked, and I say we, Tom Murphy at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette talked to Coach Stankiewicz earlier this week. He said that they are considering two pitchers to throw against Arkansas. It'll either be Nick Hull, who's been their number one starter all season, has a 7-1 record, or a freshman right-hander. Hull, by the way, is a redshirt senior, and but they've also got a freshman right-hander, Daniel Avisha, who is one of the nation's top power pitchers. I mean, you look at his numbers this year, he's averaging 6.69 strikeouts for every walk. He's one of 29 pitchers nationally who has a whip under 1. He's got a .99 whip. It really comes down to, I guess, for the Antelopes, what matchup do they think is best against Arkansas? Because I think in their situation is a lot like what we were talking about Arkansas's had the last couple of years. You've really got kind of a 1A and 1B pitcher right here. And if, regardless of who they throw, it's not necessarily an instance of pitching off and saving a guy for Saturday. They've got the luxury of a couple of guys who, which one do we want to use that matches up best with the Razorbacks?
Well, and if you look at their numbers, Avisha, I think the key to beating the Razorbacks, you got to be able to get our lefties out. I mean, Dave Van Horn can stack a lineup full of lefties, and they both. Avisha gives righty or lefties are hitting 270 against him. Against Hull, lefties are hitting 317. Against Avisha, righties are hitting 186. So if you just go numbers wise, you got to say Avisha, but Avisha is a freshman. Do you put a freshman out there on that big stage? It doesn't seem to have bothered him this year. I bet you that's who they go with because his numbers are really good. He's got good strikeout numbers, strikeout the walk. He's struck out 107 batteries, only walked 16. So he's a control guy. He might be the guy that they go with. I think they could go with either one, but I think if you just go off the numbers, I think Avisha is going to be the guy they end up going with. And, it comes down to us when he's a control guy like that. You got to be patient at the plate because he's going to try to get you to swing at his pitch early in the count and get that quick out. Probably going to pitch backwards a little bit. I haven't looked at any video on him yet, but I will. But I think that's probably they're going to be their go-to guy.
Just to clarify those numbers, Hull 233 against left-handers, Avisha 270 against left-handers, Avisha 188 against right-handers, and Hull right-handers batting 317 against him. The age between the two of them, Bubba, how much do you think that goes into Stankiewicz's thought process, who he's going to throw against Arkansas, where you've got Hull, a fifth-year senior? I haven't looked this up, but I would imagine that he pitched last year when Grand Canyon was in the NCAA tournament as well, whereas you've got Avisha, a true freshman who's never pitched in this type of setting before.
Yeah, I think it's age is important sometimes, but you look at like a Brady Tiger. He's a freshman. When the game's on the line, I want the ball in his hands. He does not pitch like a freshman. Avisha might be that same kind of guy. If you've got that makeup as a freshman, it doesn't matter. I think at the end of the day, he's going to go with who's got the best stuff. I don't know enough about Hull to say that one way or the other, or Avisha, but it's one of those things where some freshmen these days don't pitch like freshmen. They just got that makeup on the mound. They want the ball in that big game, and he might be that type of player.
We talked about O'Brate Stadium earlier this week. You and I were exchanging some text messages a couple of weeks ago. If Arkansas doesn't host, where would you like to go? I said, I'd love to go to Stillwater because I want to see this stadium. It was opened in 2021. There were reports that it cost between $60 and $70 million to build the stadium. Now, it wasn't just a stadium they built, very similar to what Arkansas has with the indoor facility, the Hunt Center. Oklahoma State built its versions of those types of facilities as part of this larger baseball complex. But this is one of the real beautiful ballparks in college baseball, Bubba. And I think it fits Oklahoma State's history a lot better than Allie P. Reynolds did. I always kind of chuckled whenever I'd walk into Allie P. and you walk in there and they've got all these plaques up, Robin Ventura and what was Pete's last name?
Incaviglia.
There you go, yeah. Pete Incaviglia. And, you've got all these homages to Oklahoma State's past, and then you walk out into this ballpark and it's like, this is what a program with this much history plays in. And I just feel like O'Brate Stadium really fits Oklahoma State's kind of baseball history a lot better. I'm really looking forward to going over there and getting to see games in this type of setting. And I think it's a really neat deal for the other teams who are coming in, even Arkansas that plays at, one of the great ballparks in the country too. You get to go into, this really great setting to play what are your biggest, most meaningful games to date.
Well, I remember playing at the old stadium back in the day, and I remember playing first base as a freshman with Robin Ventura hitting. I'm holding a runner on, and he's hitting rockets down the first baseline foul. And I'm like, this is not a comfortable place to be, because it wasn't the best playing surface. I don't know. Anyone that played there can tell you the old playing surface was not very good.
Mm-hmm.
So not a good feeling. And but anyway, and we've taken showcase teams back there, high school teams, during the summer, and we've played at the old stadium. And a funny story is, a few years ago, I'm out there and there's a guy raking first baseline, and we show up on the field and we start getting loose, and I'm asking him a few questions, just about the field and everything. It ends up being Josh Holiday. He had one of those scoop hats on. I couldn't see his face. And he goes, "You don't remember me, do you?" And we had crossed paths several times on it. So, but it's Josh Holiday out there in the middle of the summer, raking the field, getting it ready for a high school showcase game. And I thought that was really awesome. But at that time, what was neat about it, he started telling me about the new stadium. He said, "You can't wait till the new stadium. It's going to be open in, I thought he said then 2021. But he said it's going to be awesome." He started telling me all about it. It was really neat, just his excitement when he's talking about the new stadium being built, and the history's there, and they really they deserve it. So I'm glad they got him a nice stadium built there. Looking forward to seeing it.
Josh Holiday, the head coach of Oklahoma State, and the interactions I've had with him, Bubba, he reminds me a lot of Dave Van Horn.
He does, because you look at it and you're like, how many other coaches would be out there in the middle of the summer? I mean, it's hot out there, raking the field, getting ready for a showcase. But I could see Dave Van Horn doing that. I could see an Andy Stankiewicz doing that. And it's just, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that separates these guys. They're not just head coaches, they're baseball guys. And if you're a baseball guy, you want to be out there on the field. And Josh Holiday did, and it was just neat. He was really excited about the new stadium and talking about it. So that's something that stands out to me and is really really neat. Hopefully I get a chance to talk to him about it when we're in town.
Oklahoma State is really unique in that they have two former big league all-stars, Robin Ventura and Matt Holliday, who are on their coaching staff, and neither of them are in full-time coaching roles. Their full-time assistant coaches are Rob Walton, the pitching coach, who used to be a head coach at ORU for several years. Arkansas has seen him quite a bit, either in the regular season or in the postseason. And their hitting coach is Justin Seeley, who came to Oklahoma State from Texas A&M. He played for Dave Van Horn at Nebraska, was part of those great teams with Will Bolt and some of the other players who we've talked about this year at Nebraska, Artie Spees, the players from Nebraska who have really kind of gone out and populated the Division I coaching circuit. Really interesting staff when you've got a player like Robin Ventura, who's a 5-year big league manager with the White Sox, and you've got a 7-time All-Star like a Matt Holliday, who's Josh Holliday's younger brother, on staff, and neither of them are in a full-time coaching role. That's kind of an embarrassment of riches for this OSU program.
Yeah, it's kind of different, but you know what? I'll take Bobby Wernis over both of them any day. I love Bobby Wernis, so hopefully Bobby's listening to this. But no, it's kind of neat. The story there with Robin Ventura and Matt Holliday both coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's awesome. I think it's good, and the players. I know that the players enjoy having those guys around, and just their knowledge of the game. I know Robin Ventura, when he was a manager, he was a good manager. Surprised he never got another, big league managing job. Maybe there's one down the road for him, but both good baseball guys. And, I'm sure the guys enjoy having them around.
People who don't know the Oklahoma State story, Matt Holliday and Josh Holliday, their father, Tom Holliday, was a longtime coach at Oklahoma State, an assistant coach there for many years, and then he was the head coach there for 7 years in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. You look at these four teams, Bubba, and one thing kind of stood out to me is that Missouri State, Oklahoma State, and Grand Canyon all played a lot of games in their conference tournament last week, whereas Arkansas, they played basically 2 games in by the time the tournament starts, 2 games basically in like 13 days. Do you think the rest helps the Razorbacks? Whereas you had Oklahoma State playing 5 games in the Big 12 tournament, and Missouri State played 6 games in the Missouri Valley tournament. How much do you think that rest helps Arkansas?
I think it's huge. I got asked that question yesterday, Matt, and that's the give me some positives from Razorbacks going 0-2 in Hoover. And I said that exact same thing. I said, well, we're rested. We can get out of Hoover. We can get back here home, get healthy, get our minds right, and get kind of reset before we get into, to Stillwater. And reset is a word that I've heard said a whole lot over the last few days, but it's a real thing. It's something you can come back and just mentally and just kind of reset things and start all over again. I said last week on the podcast, treat it like opening day. And it really is. It's a whole, everything that's happened throughout the season doesn't matter starting Friday. It's opening day. It's day one of the postseason. And so I think we go out and play the game that way. But I think you look at our pitching staff, Evan Taylor, he hasn't been he's been really good. Don't get me wrong, but he hasn't been as sharp. I think he had a little fatigue. I think he's a perfect example of a guy that just needed a little bit of a break. I think it's going to help Jackson Wiggins, Hagen Smith. I think just having a little extra break, I think they're going to come out really sharp. I think the whole bullpen, guys just getting them a little break, and then, hitters mentally getting back here and just getting back in the cage and just getting some good quality swings in the cage, getting your mind right, whether you watch your Dig Me video or whatever you ended up doing this week, just to get your mind right. I think it's going to be huge for us.
Yeah, I think about a player like Michael Turner, who, he's played so many games this year, obviously has caught a lot of games. And it seems like maybe his average has gone down in the last few weeks, maybe because he's battling some really tired legs.
Well, when you're catching 3 games a weekend, and people don't realize the stress that puts on your body, and not just that. I mean, he's calling pitches too. Now he gets advice, he gets every once in a while from Matt Hobbs. There, he's able to talk to his earpiece, but for the most part, Michael Turner's calling that game, so he's worried about the scouting report of each hitter in that other team's lineup, what their pitcher's throwing, or what our pitcher's throwing that day, what his best pitch is that day. Is his breaking ball on? Is he hitting his spots with his fastball? Can he locate in or out? Or is he just arm side that day? Or is he just glove side? He's got all those other things going on. Then he still has to grab a bat, go up to the plate, and think about the game plan to face that pitcher he's facing on the mound. People don't realize that, how much work goes into it. I know Casey Opitz last year struggled, later in the year. You see catchers drop off later in the year because there's so much wear and tear on the body, but then just mentally, it is just an absolute drain to do what those guys do every day. And I think it's a huge break for him to get back and take a couple of days off. And I think he's going to be refreshed. I know of all people, Michael Turner cannot wait to get back out on the field on Friday.
I also feel like this time of year, the heat really starts to wear on you and maybe makes you a little bit more sore after games. I'm sure there's a lot of things that he's battling. And we're going to talk more about Michael Turner and the elephant in the room here in a few minutes. Constructing a lineup for the postseason. Dave Van Horn was talking about this earlier this week. It's really, I think, kind of one of the more I don't know if baffling's the word, but it's just that we haven't seen any consistency in Arkansas's lineup. In terms of how it's constructed on a day-to-day basis. I mean, last year it felt like, there'd be some tweaks. You might move a guy from 5 to 6 or from 4 to 5, but for the most part, where guys were hitting in early April's where they were hitting when NC State came to town late in the year. And there's just been so much fluidity throughout the lineup this year, trying to get something to consistent, from hitter to hitter. We even saw this in Hoover, putting Braden Webb in the leadoff spot for the Florida game in the final game down there. How do you think they construct a lineup? And I guess it really starts with the leadoff hitter, where Caden Wallace has been for most of the year, but don't know if we're going to see him there this week.
Well, here's the way I look at it, Matt. As a hitter, you want to know what your role is. You want to know, am I an on-base guy? Am I hitting in the leadoff spot? Am I supposed to see pitches, get on base? Am I a middle of the lineup guy that's supposed to drive runs in? Am I the end of the lineup guy where I've got to scratch and claw to get on base? Everyone has their role, and we haven't had a consistent lineup this year. And I'm not criticizing Dave Van Horn for that. I'm just saying that, the players, no one has really settled into those roles. We don't have a true leadoff guy. And I think it hurts if you don't have a leadoff guy. It's hard to construct the other 8 batters in the lineup, in my opinion. I think having a guy consistently at the top of the lineup, especially those 1-2 guys, then you can construct stuff after that. But, constantly looking for a leadoff guy makes it tough. And there's just a continuous, you're trying to balance out the lineup. Now, I think going into this weekend, I think we're going to look at, okay, who are we facing? Does this guy, gives up 100 points more on his batting average versus righties versus lefties. I think that's going to have a whole lot to do with the lineup. I wouldn't be surprised if DVH really loads up the lineup. If we see, Avisha or Hull, either one on Friday, we might load that lineup up with lefties. You might see Borfin in there. You might see all them. Now, I still think you're going to see Lanzilli in there. He's earned the right to be in that lineup every day, but I know it's probably been a little bit frustrating for Dave not being able to settle in on one lineup. And to be honest with you, it's probably frustrating for the players not to really know, where you're going to be from day to day. But, that's just kind of the nature of the game. And that's how our lineup has been constructed this year. But I really think going into this weekend, I think Dave's going to put everyone in the right spot. And I expect us to come out clicking on Friday.
Another thing that Van Horn said earlier this week was that this team doesn't have a vocal leader. And that's something a lot of people have kind of clung on to and I've heard some talk about this week. I thought it was interesting, maybe a day or two after he said that, Robert Moore was on a radio show in Little Rock on the Buzz with David Basil in the morning. And he was asked about that and having a vocal leader. And I'm paraphrasing what Robert said here. He said, number one, that he agrees with that. Number two, that he didn't think last year's team had a vocal leader. And one of the other things that I thought was interesting was he said that in baseball, if you have a guy who's, constantly being loud in the dugout, that might almost get annoying for a team. I just wonder, you've been in a lot of baseball dugouts. What did you think about that comment that Dave made? And is there a benefit or maybe a negative to having a vocal, someone who's overly vocal like that?
Well, I think if you term it overly vocal, yeah, that can be an annoying thing. When you're down
bad wording on my part. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying though, but I talked last week about we're missing like a Carson Shaddy. To me, Carson Shaddy brought a lot of energy. Whether he's going good or bad, he brought positive energy. If he's 0 for 4, he's still bringing energy. I think that's important on a team to have that vocal energy guy. And then he's also a guy that's not afraid to get in someone's butt if they're dogging it or if they're giving away at bats. He'll go light them up a little bit. I think you got to have that guy on your team. I think you also need your clown. You need your clubhouse guy is what I call them. Every team that I ever won had kind of a rah-rah guy that got the guys up, just energy wise. And then we always had the clubhouse clown, not really a clown, but just a guy that was just always lighthearted and just kept the spirits up, because baseball is a game of failure. Jorge Posada used to always cheer me up. He did this little thing with his ears. He could make his ears move. If I was having a bad game, he would sit next to me on the bench, look at me, and he would make his ears wiggle. And it made all of my bad at bats go away. And it just, it's crazy. It's the silliest thing, but it would cheer me up. And I'd be, okay, let's go get him. He never had to say a word. He didn't. He could just look at me and wiggle his ears. I know no one can see what I'm doing in a podcast. I wish you could see it. I can't make my ears do that. I wish I could, or I would probably just do it in the mirror all day. But it was just the funniest thing. But, so you got to have those little things in baseball. It's such a it's just a drain, and it's a constant grind. And there's so much failure. But I think it's good to have a vocal guy. I really do. Now, we've got guys like Robert Moore, plays with intensity, plays hard. He's a leader, but he's not a real vocal leader. Caden Wallace, I think is probably the leader of the team, but he leads by example. He's not a real vocal guy. And it's not that you have to be. I just think it helps. I think Michael Turner's a natural born leader, but he's not real rah-rah and vocal. I think last year's leader, if I was going to pick a leader last year, I think Opitz was kind of our leader of the team last year. I really do. Now, he wasn't real rah, but he'd get the guys up, and he was a guy that would go light someone up if they needed it, and get them going, get them a little spark. But It is what I mean. We just don't have that guy this year. Doesn't mean we're not going to win. I mean, we can go out there and let our play on the field, let the scoreboard be the rah-rah, But I just think it helps when things are kind of going bad. If you've got that guy that can say, "Come on, guys, let's go get them right here." We got them right where we want them. Something like that. I don't know.
You mentioned Turner. That's a good segue into this mess that Arkansas has been dealing with all week with the comments of Derek Ruskin on the ESPN radio last week, last Friday, and I'm sure people have heard it. I'm not going to play the comments here, and I don't want to make this personal against Derek Ruskin, someone who I don't know very well personally, know him just a little bit professionally. I was on his show a time or two whenever he did a morning show, but I feel like there's a difference between criticizing the player and criticizing the person. And there's a fine line. And I felt like this went over that line. He wasn't criticizing Michael Turner, the player. He was criticizing Michael Turner, the person, and used some names and, some comments that I think, he probably regrets. Again, I don't know him, but I would have to think that he really regrets some of the things that he said about Michael. I want your opinion on this. Just what did you hear, and what are your thoughts as you heard that, being a former college athlete? Because I think there's a difference between the expectations that you put on a college athlete versus some of the expectations that you put on a professional athlete, and maybe some of these expectations that have been put on Arkansas this year have been more in line with what we see from pro sports.
I think you're right, Matt. And I'll tell you what, it disgusts me because, I'm a Razorback fan. I get to know these guys. I love those players out on the field, and I know how hard they work. And so for someone to say what he did about a player, it's just not right. And it really just makes my skin crawl to hear it. I feel for these guys when they got to listen to that crap, because it's, they're out there busting their butts and playing hard every day, representing the University of Arkansas and the state of Arkansas. And they do it the right way. They play the game the right way. Now, do they make mistakes? Yeah, they make mistakes. But that's baseball. They're not professional baseball players. They're going to make mistakes. But to hear someone talk like that, and just some of the noise going on. Now, with that being said, I'll say, look, part of coming to University of Arkansas, the expectations, it's Omaha or bust with our fan base. And I get it. They expect a lot out of this program. We're one of the best programs, in the top programs in the country. So people expect us to go to Omaha. They don't understand, though, how hard it is to get to Omaha. And some of the people that are complaining the most are people that never played the game of baseball. Or if they did play the game of baseball, they never played it at a high level, and they don't appreciate how hard this game is. It's a hard game to play. There's so much that goes into what you see on the product. It's at noon on Friday when we show up in Stillwater. People don't realize these guys have been up since 6. They had a team meal. They meet. They go over scouting reports. There's so much that goes into everything before that game even starts that people they can't even fathom all the work that goes in. And so it's really disappointing to me. I hate it for the players, but I will say, on a positive note, something like this might be just that thing that not that we want this to be a rallying cry, but it might be that thing that just, these guys are going to go into Stillwater with a chip on their shoulder and say, hey, I'm going to play for this reason right here. Not that they haven't been playing hard to begin with, but we always talk about the mental game of baseball, and maybe something like this is just enough to get these guys just a little bit more fired up, where they can say, you know what, we're gonna stick it up your butt. This is Razorback baseball. This is how we play the game. But in a nutshell, I hated it, Matt. And I every time I think about it, when you bring it up, it makes me mad. It makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I don't like it.
To take that comment and turn it into something else about not being a real Razorback, the whole comment about being a rental player, I thought that was really bad. I mean, you look at over the course of the last 2 or 3 years at Arkansas, I mean, who are the best players? Women's basketball, Chelsea Dungy, Amber Ramirez. They were both transfer players. Football, players like John Ridgway and Felipe Franks and Rakeem Boyd are some of the best players that they've had. They were all transfers. Every Eric Musselman team that's gone to the Elite Eight has been littered with transfer players. Even the baseball teams that went to Omaha in 2018 and 19 and had that great run last year, filled with transfer players. And, so I thought that was really out of line to say that these players who have come into the program, to have a different opportunity than wherever they went, that somehow they're less a part of the culture or the team. I thought that was just out of line.
I do too. Michael could have gone a lot of places, but he came here, and I've gotten a chance to know Michael really well. He spends a little bit of time up at the facility, working with some catchers, and I know he's great with the kids. But I mean, he's a Razorback, and the day he signed to come here was a happy day for him, and he talks about it a lot. How much he appreciates what University of Arkansas has done for him, how excited he is to be here and to represent University of Arkansas baseball. And so, yeah, to say that's just totally out of line, because that kid loves putting on that uniform every day, whether he's been here for 1 year or 5 years, it doesn't matter. He puts on that uniform with pride every day and does everything he can and works his butt off to represent this university. And so, yeah, I hate to hear that. It's unfortunate.
Well, and the thing is, there was this comment that he hasn't been a good player this season. It's so far off base. I mean, Michael Turner, I don't know if a lot of people realize this. He's one of 16 semifinalists for the Buster Posey Award. That's the award that they give to the best catcher in college baseball. Now, is he going to be one of the 3 finalists? I would be surprised if that's the case. But he's in the conversation. 300 something starting catchers in college baseball. He's in the conversation of that top 3 or 4% of all catchers in the game, or at least in the college game right now. He's been over a 300 hitter for most of the year. He was their RBI leader at one point this season. His batting average was up toward 350 at one point this season. It's fallen off, but you see a lot of players whose batting average fall off at this point in the year. It doesn't jive with the type of performance and production that Turner has given this team. Is it Casey Opitz behind the plate? No, but Casey Opitz was also one of the best defensive catchers, if not the best defensive catcher that Arkansas has ever had. But you look at it from another standpoint, Bubba, I don't know that Casey Opitz ever hit 300. I don't know that he ever came close. I don't know that he ever had power numbers close to what Michael Turner has given him this season. He's been a very integral piece to a good baseball team this year. And like I said, it's kind of a microcosm. I think Turner is, the comparison to Opitz, it's kind of like this year's team. It's compared to last year's team a lot. Is it last year's team? No. Does it mean that it's a bad baseball team? No. I think this is a good baseball team. And I think similar with Turner, people have this recency bias with this team that, because they've had a bad last couple, 3 weeks, that it somehow diminishes what they've done earlier in the season. I was having a conversation with someone this week on our message board, and it was, and I made that comment that they've had a bad 6-game stretch, and the comment was a bad 6-game stretch. Well, what's their record in the last 6 series? Well, it's 3-3. And those 6 series, they beat LSU, an NCAA regional team, should have been a host. They beat Ole Miss, a regional team. They won at Auburn, which is a regional host. And then the losses, they lost 2 one-run games at A&M, who's the number 5 national seed. They lost a very close series against Vanderbilt. They didn't get swept. It was a 1-2 series. And then they played poorly at Alabama, maybe their worst series, and it was their worst series loss of the year. They didn't play well in Hoover. There were a lot of things going on there when they didn't have Dave Van Horn, and I think that affected the team. Same goes with Turner. You forget what he did early in the year, because maybe he hasn't had the best last couple of weeks. But even then, the reason he's on the podium Friday is because he had a home run during their game against Florida. It just, I think that people kind of forget what this team and what Turner have done had done earlier this season. And that's why, I'm not going to say that Arkansas is going to win this regional in Stillwater, but I think they've got a really strong chance because they have shown this year that they can play with some really good teams, and teams that I think are maybe in line, if not better than any of the teams they're going to see in Stillwater.
Well, to your point, Matt, I mean, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I go back to the fact, and I say this team won 18 games this year in the SEC. That's not an easy task. There's a whole lot of teams that would love to have won 18 games in the SEC. Now, you go back and a couple of those one-run games, that could have easily been 22 games in the SEC. Michael's been a big part of that. He's hitting 298 right now. For a catcher that catches Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the SEC, that's good. The numbers he's put up, the runners he's thrown out, the way he had to learn an all new pitching staff, and people forget that he had to learn a whole new staff this year. And then to call pitches, Matt Hobbs trusts him to call pitches. It's just it's unfair that to attack him, but he's done a great job. Him coming here is a big part of why we have 18 wins in the SEC, in my opinion. And it's unfortunate. I feel for him, and like I said, I've got the chance to know him, and I love the kid a lot. And it's when people say stuff like that, I think the redneck in me gets mad. You just want to take someone out behind the shed and smack them around a little bit and say, hey, okay, now let's rethink this. But you can't do that in 2022. So I can't say that. I already said it on the podcast, so I guess it's over with. But I think you know what I'm saying. It's just, it's frustrating. This is a good team that's had a couple of bad weeks, and that happens. I never played on a team my whole life that didn't go through a struggle, a few games here and there. Sometimes it was a bad few games. Sometimes it was a bad few weeks. Sometimes it was a bad month, but it happens in baseball. All right. And there's just nothing you can do about it. We've just been spoiled, in the fact that in recent years, we haven't had those bad stretches. And we have, but we've been able to eke out a couple of wins here and there. But this is still a good team. I think we're going to go to Stillwater this weekend and show how good we really are.
One more point on all this is that I've heard a lot of people have talked about, now that players are getting money through NIL deals, that somehow they are professional baseball players. And I think that's so far from reality. I looked up some numbers. The most recent numbers that the University of Arkansas has put out is that they had 160 players who had signed, 159 players who had signed NIL deals. Now, this was as of January. I'm sure there have been some more. For instance, the entire softball team got some endorsements during their postseason run, but 159 players as of January out of 460 on campus. Remember that 159 have gotten deals out of 460. That means that there's somewhere around 300 players who had not gotten any kind of endorsement at all. And those 159 players, the average that they were getting in NIL endorsements was $5,600. And you probably got a starting quarterback or a starter on a basketball team who's getting a lot more. It's probably more than likely that you've got players who might be getting like $300 and $400 in gift cards. These aren't professional players.
No, you're right. They're not at all. They're still college kids out there representing the University of Arkansas. They're playing for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back. And there's a big difference in the two. And when those lines get skewed and they start playing for the name on the back, then they deserve a little bit more criticism. But right now they're playing for the name on the front of the jersey, which is University of Arkansas Razorback. They're representing the state of Arkansas, and they need to be treated with a little bit of respect, or a whole lot of respect, while they're out there busting their butts to represent, our state and our university. And not that people don't have a right to criticize, Matt. I mean, look, you can say stuff, but I think you said it perfect. Don't criticize the kid. You can criticize his performance. You can say, well, he shouldn't have swung at that pitch over his head, or shouldn't have thrown that ball away, or he should have made that play. There's a way to go about it. I mean, we can't tell people we can't micromanage what people say. It's just, but you got to be smart about it, and don't criticize personally that kid. And I think that's when you cross the line.
That there are recruits who are watching this. I saw where Eric Cole, who played for the Razorbacks, said that after they lost the World Series championship game in 2018, he had people telling him to go kill himself. And there's no place for that. And I think, people have got to realize that their words have consequences. Even if you're behind a keyboard, your words have consequences, and it can hurt your program more than it can motivate the players that I guess you're trying to motivate. I don't know what goes into their line of thinking when they do that. The Whole Hog Baseball Podcast is sponsored by Massage Envy, voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Visit Mike and his staff in Tuscany Square at 2603 West Pleasant Grove Road in Rogers, or in Fayetteville at 3557 North Shiloh Drive. Massage Envy has services for everyone. MassageEnvy.com.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
You know it never goes out of style, a great burger. And for a long time now, the best burgers around have been made at CJ's Butcher Boy. I've been stopping at their Russellville location for years to enjoy a double with bacon, cheese, and all the fixins. Well, the fries are always made fresh, and their shakes are made with real premium ice cream. And now that CJ's Butcher Boy has a Fayetteville location too on Weddington, you can bet I'll be there a lot more. CJ's Butcher Boy in Russellville and Fayetteville. When all you do are burgers, they have to be the best.
Welcome back to the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Now let's look at this week in the SEC, presented by CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers.
9 SEC teams are in the NCAA tournament again this year, same number as last year. The difference is last season there were 7 regional hosts, just 4 regional hosts. This year there will be regionals on the campus of Tennessee. No surprise there. The number 1 overall seed, A&M, is the number 5 overall seed. Both of those teams won't have to leave home before the College World Series. Also, maybe a little bit surprised to some, Florida got a regional. They got hot at the end of the year, won, I think, 20 of their last 25 games. And then Auburn surprised a lot of people by getting a regional. And they're going to host a pretty stacked field this week. UCLA, Florida State, and Southeast Louisiana are going to come down to the Plains. Bubba, were there surprises for you? Either teams that got into the tournament from the SEC, teams that didn't get in, teams that are hosting a regional, teams that aren't hosting a regional?
Yeah, Ole Miss getting in was a big surprise for me. I thought, and then Alabama. You know, I thought Alabama deserved. They went and they played really well in the SEC tournament. Even Kentucky got hot at the end. Florida getting a regional was a surprise to me. Notre Dame, I think they kind of got shunned. It seems like that's 2 years in a row they kind of got shunned. NC State not getting in, I thought was a little bit, a head scratcher. So there were a few things, but listening to Mike Buddy. I was impressed that Mike Buddy came on and answered all the questions. And, he's the director of the selection committee. I think he chairs it. He answered all the questions. And I tell you what, he had reasons for everything they did. And, most of them made sense. I thought he really put a lot of time and effort into it, making the right choices. Does everyone agree to him? No. I mean, you're never going to make everyone happy, but man, it's tough right now. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, Matt, where every win is so important in today's game of college baseball.
We're going to run through these regionals that don't involve Arkansas, but do involve SEC teams real quick. In Knoxville, Tennessee will host Georgia Tech, Campbell, and Alabama State. You think Tennessee can just rubber stamp their way to the Super Regionals?
Yeah,
I think so.
Challenged a whole lot.
But playing in that ballpark, especially, I was a little surprised. You look at A&M's field. This is a tough field. You've got TCU, Louisiana Lafayette, and ORU coming to College Station. Of course, TCU is where Jim Schlossnagle used to be the head coach. TCU and A&M, if you haven't paid attention, have had some epic postseason battles, both in the regionals and in the super regionals. And you've got Louisiana Lafayette, coached by Matt Deggs, a former Arkansas assistant, but he's also a longtime former A&M assistant. You've got a lot of personal history that's tied up within that field.
Okay, so if you look at the TCU matchup against A&M, that's kind of a head scratcher. That's a question I would love to have asked the committee and say, okay, what did y'all not put a whole lot of thought into that? I mean, that's, to me, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but Schlossnagle spent a lot of time at TCU. Now he's at A&M. That's just kind of a strange place it looks like they could have sent them somewhere else, but hey, that's just me. That is a tough regional though.
TCU was the Big 12 regular season champions, but they're kind of like Arkansas. They were plagued by a little bit of a low RPI. I think their RPI was only 5 spots ahead of the Razorbacks. In Gainesville, Florida is going to host OU, Liberty, and Central Michigan. A couple of notes. Remember, Liberty went to Gainesville and won 2 of 3 on opening weekend. Central Michigan is the only 40 team, or the only 4 seed that has 40 or more wins. And then you've got OU, who got red hot at the end of the season, won the Big 12 tournament. A lot of people thought that OU might get to host in Norman. This is a tough field for the Gators.
Tough one. Anyone could come through that one. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Liberty, don't sleep on Liberty. They've had a good year, and so anything can happen there. Now, when Florida's hot, they're really good. They're a good team. They're like a Vandy. You know, Vandy's one day when they left here after that with Vandy weekend, I said, they're the best team we've played all year. And then they go and just lay an egg after that. And Florida's kind of the same way. You know, one day they look like they're unbeatable, and the next day they just fall apart. So if they're able to put it all together, I think they'll come out of that regional. But if they falter at all, I mean, they're in trouble.
Auburn, we mentioned they've got a tough one too. UCLA, Florida State, and Southeastern Louisiana, a team that played Arkansas earlier this season. They end up winning their conference, and they'll be sent to Auburn. Another tough field.
Another tough one. I don't know who you're picking out of there. Southeast Louisiana can surprise some people there. They're a good squad, so you know anything can happen. But when Auburn gets their bats rolling, they're really tough once they get hot at the plate. So, you know, once again, anything can happen.
Really cool matchup, I think, potentially in Corvallis, Oregon. You've got San Diego and New Mexico State are the undercards there. You could potentially have a regional championship between Oregon State and Vanderbilt. What a matchup that could be.
Okay, so I'm glad that's not us getting sent out there. So I'm glad Vandy had to jump on the grenade there and go out there. But yeah, you're right. That could be a great matchup. Who do you think will come out on top there?
I'd pick Vanderbilt.
I do too. I think Vandy. They're good.
Not only are they good, but Oregon State they're kind of like Oklahoma State. They limped down the stretch, and I was surprised to see them get a national seed as high as a number 3 seed. They didn't play very well down the stretch, the Beavers. And the thing about Vanderbilt, and I think this is a huge credit to Tim Corbin, is that his teams can play you at your game and beat you. They are so good at adapting to whatever style of play you need them to adapt to. I think they can play West Coast baseball with the best of them. And I think that they'll go into Corvallis and win that.
You know what? That's awesome that you said that. You're absolutely right. I think they're a perfect fit to go out to the West Coast and come out on top. I mean, they really are. And, it starts with Enrique Bradfield. And I think DVH called him the best leadoff guy in the nation. And he's unbelievable. I mean, he is really good. And he's a game changer.
I don't know if you're like me watching the selection show on Monday, but they didn't announce Stillwater until later in the show. So, they've got all these different sites coming up, Corvallis, Miami, Palo Alto. And it's like, please don't send the Razorbacks there. And it had nothing to do for me. It was totally selfish on my part. It had nothing to do with matchups. It had to do with convenience of travel. I'm really happy Arkansas didn't get sent to any of these coastal cities. Now, they might end up in Chapel Hill next week. We'll talk about that in just a minute. In Miami, you've got the Hurricanes are the host. Arizona goes out there. Ole Miss, Canisius.
Boy. I don't know. That's a coin toss. And see, once again, though, Matt, I look at Ole Miss, and I'm like, how are they not better? Their lineup is stacked from top to bottom. They're another team. If they get hot offensively, they can just outscore everyone there, and they can come out of there. But I just don't know if they can put it together consistently, enough games to win.
Chapel Hill's one to watch because that pairs up with Stillwater. If Arkansas wins the Stillwater Regional, they'll play the winner of the Chapel Hill Regional. If North Carolina wins it, Arkansas will go to Chapel Hill next week. If Georgia, the number 2 seed, wins this, you've also got VCU and Hofstra in that regional. If Georgia wins it, then you've got the potential for possibly another All-SEC Super Regional at Baum Walker next weekend.
Go Georgia. They're my new favorite team, Matt.
It'll be interesting to see how that one goes. Georgia's kind of underperformed, I think, toward the end of the season. They had that terrible final weekend against Missouri. They got bounced out of the SEC tournament on day 1. and North Carolina's been playing pretty well this year. In Hattiesburg, this is one where I think if you're Southern Miss, you hate to see the number 2 seed LSU comes in. Kennesaw State and Army are also part of that. When you think LSU can go over to Hattiesburg and win?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think they can go through that regional.
I thought LSU was probably my biggest surprise that they didn't get to host. And I know that I think what ended up killing LSU as a host is the same thing that propelled Ole Miss to get into the tournament. And it was that Ole Miss went to Baton Rouge toward the end of the season and swept LSU. I think that kept LSU from hosting. And I think that got Ole Miss in.
I think you're absolutely right.
The SEC Report's brought to you by CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers, the best in 2 towns. You can visit the original at 2803 North Arkansas Avenue in Russellville, or the newest location at 3484 West Weddington Drive in Fayetteville, just minutes from Baum-Walker Stadium. Skip the line and order online or download the app in your app store. CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers, when all you do are burgers, they have to be the best. Arkansas played 25 games this year against 10 teams that made the NCAA tournament. The Razorbacks were 13-12 in those games, Bubba. You had all the SEC teams that we know about also getting into the tournament this year. Stanford, the number 2 overall national seed. The Razorbacks played them at Round Rock, also played Louisiana Lafayette in Round Rock. And then we mentioned Southeastern Louisiana and Missouri State. Kind of a surprise. I don't know that a lot of people would have thought when Missouri State came to Fayetteville a few weeks ago that they'd get into the postseason. They got on quite a nice run there toward the end.
Yeah, they did. When they came to town, I think we kind of helped them get hot. They seemed to heat up a little bit after they left Fayetteville. So, and started playing a little bit better. And they've actually been kind of on a roll, playing really good baseball lately.
You know, Missouri State benefited from getting to host the Missouri Valley Conference at Hammons Field, I think, up in Springfield. I don't know that they win the Missouri Valley if they don't get it on their home field. That's one of those benefits of playing in a smaller conference where the conference tournament, it's not always in the same spot. It rotates around to different home stadiums.
Yeah, I think that helped them a lot being at home. But, you know, they're still playing good baseball, and they've gotten hot at the right time. So a team like that, can they go through this regional? I don't know if they have the horses to get through there or not, but hey, at this point, anything can happen.
I wanted to mention one thing. We were talking about some of the players to watch in Stillwater, and I completely overlooked these 2 players. Not that I overlooked them, I just didn't mention them. You've got Justin Campbell, a pitcher from Oklahoma State, and you've got a shortstop at Grand Canyon, Jacob Wilson, who these are both semifinalists for the Golden Spikes Award. These are, you know, Campbell is going to be a high round pick this year. Wilson's probably going to be a high round pick in later years whenever his time comes to get in the MLB draft. I heard Mike Rooney on the NCAA tournament selection show Monday say that he's going to be a first round pick at some point in time. These are really the players to watch, I think, you know, from a draft perspective this weekend.
I think so. You look at Jacob Wilson, you know, Phil and I talked about him because his dad, Jack, played for the Pirates. You know, Phil's one of a few Pirates fans. And
remaining.
Yeah, the few remaining Pirates fans. So, so Jack Wilson was a really good player. And it sounds like his son's coming along in his footsteps. Might be a better player, got a little bit more power to plate. And then, you know, if you look at Justin Campbell, just crazy numbers. You know, when you look at the numbers that he's thrown up this year, you know, he's got 94 innings, 73 hits, 133 strikeouts, only 23 walks. Opponents hitting 212 against him. He's the real deal. I wouldn't be surprised if to see Oklahoma State pitch off on Friday and save Justin Campbell for game 2.
Campbell, those 123 strikeouts, that's 7th nationally. That's 5.35 strikeouts for every walk. And we were talking about him a little bit earlier. It's kind of surprising to look at his numbers that he's a right-handed pitcher, but right-handers hit 100 points higher against him than left-handers do. And when I told you that, you immediately said it must mean that he has a good changeup.
Yeah, I mean, typically a guy like that, he's a big righty. Typically when he holds lefties to that low, lefties hit 157 against him. That means he's usually a guy that's got a really good straight change. It's typically a changeup that can start on the outer part of the plate and have a little arm side run off the plate. He either gets a swing and miss or can get weak contact on that pitch. He can probably throw it, 1-0, 2-1 counts, any advantage count, he can get weak contact with it, or with it when it's like a full count situation, he can get weak contact or a strikeout on it. So typically that's what that means, is he's got a good changeup. Sometimes it's a guy that has a cutter that comes in. But most of the time when you see numbers like that, it's a guy that's got a change up that's got some good, he hides it well. It's got a little bit of arm side fade at the end.
Troy Eklund coming up next to help us preview the Stillwater Regional. This is the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast.
Massage Envy has been voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Great therapists and estheticians go along with a new service that I am truly excited about. Rapid Tension Relief uses a special tool that will melt the tension and soreness away. Trust me, you will not be disappointed in the results. I highly recommend this feature along with a total body stretch assisted stretch program. Whether you are competing at a high level or just want to relax, these services are for everyone. Massage, rapid tension relief, total body stretch, deep muscle treatment massage, you choose. Or you can try any combination of those. So the next time you're feeling tight, make sure to call my friends at Massage Envy.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Grease Pig, this is Mike.
Coming in hot, so I can just stay in my vehicle during my oil change?
That's right. The Grease Pig wants to help keep you safe, so now you can stay in your vehicle during your oil change.
These guys are working like a pit crew.
That's part of our 17-point inspection, where we check your belts and hoses, we check and fill all your fluids, and offer full repair on all vehicles. And of course, we use Castrol products.
Why do I smell coffee?
You know our waiting room is still open.
And give up front row seats to my own oil change? No, thank you. You're doing awesome. Mike, I think I'm making them uncomfortable.
Get into the Grease Pig, your local automotive specialist for over 20 years.
Welcome back to the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Let's take a look at the week ahead, presented by Grease Pig.
Arkansas in the Stillwater Regional this weekend. The Razorbacks will play Grand Canyon at noon Friday. That game will be televised by SEC Network. The nightcap Friday night will be Oklahoma State and Missouri State. And then the matchup Saturday and throughout the rest of the weekend will be determined by who wins and loses the rest of the games. The week ahead is brought to you by the Grease Pig. For 20 years, they have specialized in serving UA students, faculty, and staff with 2 locations in Fayetteville on College Avenue and MLK Boulevard. The Grease Pig has experience for all your repair needs and, of course, complete service oil changes staffed with ASE certified master technicians. They also provide tires and alignment services at their location on College Avenue. The Grease Pig, it's all about taking care of you, a proud supporter of the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Troy Eklund was an All-American outfielder at the University of Arkansas in the late 1980s. He's been calling Razorback games on SEC Network Plus for a number of years now. He'll be on the call on SEC Network and other ESPN broadcasts, and he joins us now. Troy, we appreciate you taking time for us.
Hey, no problem, Matt. Glad to be here.
So obviously, we're going to look at this through a Razorback lens, but you're calling all the games this weekend in Stillwater. You're familiar, obviously, with Arkansas because you call so many of their games. I know you called at least, one Missouri State game this year when they came to Fayetteville. Just what are your overall thoughts, though, on this field and what you know about these teams a couple of days before it starts?
Yeah, I think that it's a really talented field. I think Arkansas is in good shape with who they're going up against. I almost feel like Arkansas is just been playing maybe a little tentative as of late, but I think that a new venue but still being close enough where the fans can get over to Stillwater, I think is going to be a big thing. But just kind of talking about each one of the teams, they go up against Grand Canyon at first. It's a team that hits the ball really well. They have a team batting average of 309. They field. They're really good defensively, feeling in the mid 970s. So that's real solid. It's probably one of the bigger wins they've had as they split with Oregon State. We all know that they're in the top of the country. So, they're good. Obviously, Missouri State's kind of getting on a roll. And they've had a really, really good last few games. They've won 5 of their last 6 ball games. And I think that they're hot right now, and really veteran coach that Missouri State has, and then Oklahoma State. Being at home, they're going to feed off that big crowd over in Stillwater, and they have got a really solid team. I was trying to see some of the things that they have done the thing about Oklahoma State, I think it's really showed them being gritty is they've had 14 one-run games, and so they know how to play under pressure. They've also won their last 5 of 7, Matt, and again, another really good fielding team. They hit in the 280s as a team, but field almost 980. And they've got a guy named Jake Thompson that's had just an absolutely monster year. So everybody's dangerous, and everybody's got some marquee wins against some really good programs. And so it's going to be a dogfight over in Stillwater.
It's kind of funny, Missouri State, and we don't know if Arkansas will even play Missouri State in Stillwater, but there's a chance they could. When they came in here on May the 3rd, about 4 weeks ago, we were kind of reminiscent about the old days, Arkansas, Missouri State in the postseason, not even thinking that it was a possibility because of where they were. They were right at 500. I think they had a 7 or 8 game losing streak right before that. And now, lo and behold, a month later, there's a good chance Dave Van Horn and Keith Gutton could be coaching against each other in the postseason again. Kind of odd how things can change in a month.
Yeah, it really is. And, there's some definitely epic battles between Arkansas and Missouri State. And, they got really hot at the end. They won the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. And they've got a lot of momentum. And when they came to town, I went and saw Coach Gutton. And this is how long Coach Gutton has coached at Missouri State, Matt. He recruited me out of high school in Kansas City, and I walked up and I go, I think he's going to remember me, and I think he started. It's like his second year in the program, and he looks at me and goes, "Oh yeah, I remember you." He goes, you can swing the bat a little bit. So he smiled real big and knew exactly who I was. So that's the kind of guy he is. Great memory, just very personable.
I want to get your thoughts about going to O'Brate Stadium, really kind of one of the premier ballparks in the country from a college baseball perspective. It's and when you think about where Oklahoma State was at Allie P. Reynolds and where they are with O'Brate Stadium, it's kind of like maybe moving from a duplex to the Blessings. It is a huge upgrade that they have there in Stillwater. Just your thoughts on going to see this stadium and how much are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, it's going to be really fun, especially since I had the pleasure of playing in the old stadium. So it was definitely a small venue, but they always have some great fans over there, and yeah, it's definitely going to be a great environment. The stadium looks beautiful. I've never been there, but definitely a massive upgrade, like you said, from the previous stadium. One of the quotes I remember, the playing surface at the old stadium was really rough, and we played against Robin Ventura, was the third baseman at the time, and some of our infielders would talk to him and said, "How do you deal with this rough infield? Because it takes some bad hops." And he looked at him and he says, "I never take ground balls here." And that's kind of how the field was. He said he literally would only take ground balls during games because he didn't want to get gun shy of having a bad hop come up and hit him in the face or something. So, and he wasn't kidding. So that's kind of the upgrade they've had to kind of go to the, like you said, the Cadillac version of college baseball stadiums.
Yeah, and I think it may get overlooked by some people just because I don't know how many people in our viewing area, so to speak, are watching Big 12 baseball. There's so much focus on the SEC stadiums, Dudy Noble and Baum and Bluebell and Alex Box, that it may surprise some people what Oklahoma State has. I think that they spent somewhere in the $60 to $70 million range. That's the same amount that Mississippi State spent to overhaul Dudy Noble a few years ago, if that gives you any idea. And this is there aren't a lot of seats there, Troy, but it's not about capacity so much as it is just kind of the grandness, I think, of that stadium.
Right. It's a beautiful stadium. And like you're right, it says that they have 3,500 permanent seats. So they've got the ability to expand to 8,000. And I can guarantee you that's probably going to happen sooner than later. And, but yeah, it's definitely a palace, no doubt about it. And I think I was reading that Boone Pickens bought 100 acres to have the whole athletic complex built out there. And so they've definitely spent $1 or $2 on it, and it's extremely nice. And that's one great thing for Arkansas and just all the teams being able to come in and play in a really nice facility. That kind of makes the experience even that much better for the players.
Obviously, you keep up with the Razorbacks a lot because you called so many of their games. What do you think has happened over the last month or so that's caused them from going. I mean, when they left Auburn, I thought they were going to be a top 8 national seed. Their RPI was in good shape at that point. They had a great record, and it seems like things have kind of just fallen apart on them here in the last 6 games or so. Do you think there's something bigger going on, or you think that this is just kind of the normal course of baseball where you go through these peaks and valleys?
Yeah, I don't think that there's any major thing that's happening that you can really put your finger on. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier that to me it seems like the team may be playing a little tentative, and maybe a little bit of, and I'm not saying totally, but maybe a little bit of playing not to lose instead of playing to win. I think that kind of like a runner that gets out, out in front in a race, and then you can kind of feel the opponents, your other runners coming up and starting to catch you. And I think that was maybe a little bit of it, that they just were kind of that combination of playing a little tentative and maybe playing not to lose, and just kind of, like the old saying goes, just kind of, they just need to lay it on the line. And I think that Dave Van Horn, with his experience, and Matt Hobbs and Nate Thompson, they'll get these guys to maybe loosen up just a bit. And I don't think they're playing tight. I think they're just playing just a little tentative.
You were there on the Sunday of the Vanderbilt series, and they came out of that after the restart on Sunday morning, guns a-blazing. They were hitting well. They were getting guys on base. Will McIntyre had a great start. And you felt like, okay, they've got the momentum, and they're going to play really well in game 3. Then that rain delay comes. Carter Holton shuts them down. And it almost seems like they haven't been the same team since then. I wonder, from an offensive standpoint, because I thought they were playing pretty well offensively over the previous 8 games or so, at least SEC games. Is there something that happens when a pitcher shuts you down like that kind of gets you in a funk? How do you get out of something like that? Do you think that may be something that's going on with this team?
Yeah, I think that, when you have an opponent, so just like you said, an opposing pitcher that it's throwing well, and it just, as the innings kind of mount up as a hitter, I think you start feeling a little more pressure, and especially if the guy before you, it's kind of like the old saying goes, hitting is contagious, but I think the opposite is as well. And so I think if the guy in front of you maybe didn't get a hit or didn't have a good at bat, then you feel like that you may need to have, you put a little more pressure on yourself as a hitter. And I think, as the season was rolling along, they kind of had the next man up mentality. Okay, if I'm not going to do it, the next guy's going to do it, and have a lot of confidence in each other. And I think maybe just as a opposing pitcher is really throwing well, and Carter Holt did, he threw great, that you start feeling that pressure a little bit more. And I think that's just kind of like these guys just need to just kind of take another deep breath. And again, I almost think it's a good thing that they can kind of get on the road and kind of do a reset.
We've seen with a lot of Van Horn's teams where they've struggled toward the end of the year. And like you said, they get on the road and something just kind of clicks for them. And usually it starts to do that in Hoover, and it didn't happen this year. Now, Van Horn wasn't with them. He had the hospitalization. We all know about that. But we've seen it in 2009. They went to Norman. 2012, they went to Houston and played Rice. 2015, they went to Stillwater and won that regional. And all those years kick-started College World Series runs. Do you think there's a chance for that this week? Obviously, there's a chance. I wonder how good of a chance you think there is for that this week. And how do you think Arkansas matches up with Oklahoma State?
I think that this Razorback team, especially from the experience, I definitely, and I'm not just saying this because of my affiliation and calling all the Arkansas games, but the talent level is really deep, and I think that they have a really good opportunity to make a really good run. I think this team can really honestly can beat anybody. And at the beginning of the year, I thought that they were going to be an Omaha bound team. I honestly still think that it's not going to be easy, but I think that they have the capability in the makeup with the veteran lineup that they have, and even the veteran pitching staff to really go over to Stillwater and make some noise. And then I think your second part of that question is how do they match up against Oklahoma State? Oklahoma State has had a really good year, but they're 39-20. So, they've stubbed their toe a time or two and haven't just been on a roll. So I think they match up really well with them. And again, I think that Arkansas can go out there and I don't think they're going to roll through this regional, but I really think they've got a good shot to win it.
What do you think the key is for Arkansas this week?
I think just kind of have a good start in each one of their games. I think that's one of the things they've kind of found themselves kind of digging a hole early on in ball games. So I think they just need to have good at bats. I think offensively, it seems like that some of the hitters have, again, in that tentative mode, have taken some really good pitches early. When I say good, hitters pitches to hit. So I think that they need to be a selectively aggressive. Maybe that might be the way to put it, Matt, is at the plate early on. Really look for one pitch in one spot. And it doesn't even always have to be the fastball. Like, for example, Jalen Battles has been getting a lot of first pitch kind of curveballs, and he's hit a few of them. So you almost kind of look back and see what opponents are throwing you early on and really attacking that. And then if not, just then make them bring that ball in the zone.
Troy, I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you over in Stillwater this week.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
See
thanks,
you over
Troy.
There. Bye-bye.
Our thanks to Troy Eklund. Bubba, Troy was a teammate of you.
Yeah, he was. Troy's a great guy. He could swing it back in the day. I tell you what, he had a quick bat. So he was a guy. He's a couple years ahead of me, and he was a guy that always kind of took care of me. I came in as a freshman. I came out of West Fork High School, really small school, so I was overwhelmed when I came up to U of A. And Troy just really special guy, and kind of took me under his wing and looked after me.
Could you or Troy Eklund hit the ball farther now?
Right now? Ooh, that's a tough one. With the wind or against the wind?
Well, let's say in Stillwater this weekend, you guys are taking BP with the team.
I tell you
southeast
what,
wind.
I think I could hit it farther, but I think Troy could probably outrun me these days.
That's got to be kind of interesting for the two of you guys. I mean, you played together, you go off, you have your professional careers, and then you've come back in the last 5 years or so, and you're seeing each other at the ballpark just about every day.
Oh, I love it. And, Troy and I, it's fun to talk about matchups and stuff like that. And Troy's got his perspective on it. I've got mine. And typically we're pretty similar in what we think going into a series or a certain matchup on the mound. And so he's got a lot of good takes on kind of what's going on. And so he's always fun to talk to. And, and then we always venture off into some good Norm DeBryan stories, which we'll have to get into someday on here. But yeah, he's a really good guy and a good baseball guy.
I need those for that Razorback book that I'm going to write one of these days about Razorback baseball.
We can fill that thing up, Matt.
I bet so. Let's talk about Stillwater here just real quick before we get out. Your thoughts on Stillwater, keys to this weekend, like I asked Troy about, your keys to this weekend for the Razorbacks to make it through this regional.
I tell you, Troy said something that really stood out to me, and it's what I've been thinking the last, especially in Hoover. He said something to the effect of this team is kind of playing not to lose instead of playing to win. And there's a huge difference in the two. Early in the year, we went out and we were playing to win every game. We just kind of felt like we were going to win. Now I feel like we're playing a little bit tentative and just, and really just kind of playing not to lose. And I tell you, I made a statement years ago. Stump Merrill was our manager. And I kind of said the same thing in an interview after the game. I said, look, we're playing tight. We're playing, and as I said, good teams find a way to win, bad teams find a way to lose. And I feel like right now we're waiting for something to go wrong that causes us to lose the game instead of going out and taking that game from the other team. I'm not saying we're a bad team. Stump Merrill got all over me about it because he thought I was implying we're a bad team. And I'm like, no, we're a good team right now that's playing, waiting for something to go wrong instead of going out and playing to win the game. And I feel like sometimes that's what we're doing. We're not going out and playing to win. I think we're trying to do too much. So getting to Stillwater, resetting things, it's a whole new start. These guys know they're good. I think we're going to flip that switch, Matt. I think we're going to go out there and I think we're going to have a great weekend of baseball in Stillwater, and we're going to go on and play a super regional somewhere else.
I feel like all the pressure this week is on Oklahoma State. If you're
too.
Arkansas, you're not hosting a regional anymore. You're not a top 8 national seed. You're not going to win the SEC West anymore. All that stuff that I think, could have made them get tight toward the end of the season. That's all behind them now. The pressure's on Oklahoma State to win this series or win this weekend in their brand new ballpark for the first time. I feel like that allows Arkansas to go out and play real loose.
I think so. I really do. I think so, because now we can look ahead. I feel like for the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been looking back to see what's going on behind us, who's catching us. Now we could just look forward and say, okay, we got Grand Canyon at 12 o'clock. All right, let's win this game. Then we got whoever, on Saturday, and we can just look forward now and just play it, and it's a cliche. We can play it one game at a time and just handle who's in front of us, and not have to worry about anything else that's going on behind us. We can take care of who's in front of us right then. And I think there's a huge difference in the two, just the mindset of that alone, taking care of business right then. We got Grand Canyon. Let's go take care of business Friday, and then we'll worry about what happens next after that.
People always say, you got to take care of the first one. The first one's the most important. I say in a regional, the first two are the most important, because it is so important, especially a team like Arkansas, where they've had some issues in their bullpen over the last few weeks. You don't want to get into that scenario where you got to win 5 games, or you got to play 5 games in 4 days and win 4 of them to advance. I don't know that this team is built to be able to come out of the losers bracket that way.
I don't know. We got to get our bats going to do that, Matt. But I'll tell you, here's the way I look at it, and it's not a knock against Grand Canyon, Missouri State, Oklahoma State, but they're not SEC teams. I don't care what you say. Going through that gauntlet of SEC baseball is tough. You get into a regional, not that you can relax, but it's just you can kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, here we go. And I don't want that to sound negative against those other teams, but it's not SEC baseball. I'm sorry. SEC baseball is the best baseball in the country. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail from Oklahoma State and other people, but it is what it is. And so for us to go in here, we can kind of just take a deep breath and go out and just attack these guys and win this regional.
Bubba, when we go to Mexico Joe's, you're going to get the enchiladas or the chimichangas?
I think I'll go with the quesadilla.
Okay.
I'm a creature of habit, Matt, so I go quesadilla. Sorry, buddy.
Stillwater is a fun town. I'm looking forward to getting over this weekend and seeing Arkansas play. We'll be back with another podcast next week, regardless of the outcome. We'll either be talking about the Razorbacks moving forward to the Super Regional, or we'll be recapping the season. And come to WholeHogSports.com throughout the weekend. We'll have a ton of coverage from the Razorbacks in Stillwater. For Bubba Carpenter, I'm Matt Jones. Have a great weekend, everyone.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.